Hi friends, today we're going to tackle one of the most paradoxical topics in the world economy. How can natural wealth make a country super rich and at the same time completely destroy it? Look at this city in Latin America. In the 70s, it was one of the fastest growing metropolises on the continent. The girls in bright colored dresses strolled the streets, shiny cars raced by, and Western music sounded from every corner. Life was buzzing. And here it is today. This is Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, and one of the most dangerous cities in the world. Crime is rampant here. A third of the population is unemployed, and the economy is collapsing due to hyperinflation and corruption. So, what turned Caracas from a symbol of prosperity to one of South America's most depressed regions in just 50 years? The answer is oil. In 1914, Venezuela started mass production, and by the middle of the century, it turned out that its reserves were the largest in the world. By 1935, the country was living solely by selling black gold. Huge revenues allowed the government to waste money, and the society not to notice the impending crisis. But in the 1980s, oil prices collapsed, causing the collapse of the country's economy. Venezuela went from one of the richest countries on the continent to the poorest and most unstable. And this is not an isolated case. Over the past decades, oil has toppled many leaders, triggered dozens of conflicts, and still drives the world economy. Why do some countries turn natural wealth into prosperity and others into disaster? Why do oil disease and the resource curse ruin entire nations? And how have some countries managed to escape this trap? To get to the bottom of this, let's look at how oil has changed the world and see its consequences. The history of oil's ascent to the economic Olympus began in the middle of the 19th century when a Canadian physician and geologist, Abraham Gessner, extracted a strange liquid with an amazing quality from petroleum products. It burned brightly and for a very long time. This new substance, called kerosene, sparked a cultural revolution. In just a few years, kerosene not only replaced gas in streetlights around the world, but also saved the whale population from extermination. Whale fat used to be the main source of artificial light, and hundreds of thousands of whales were killed for its sake. But kerosene turned out to be 10 times cheaper than whale fat and made whaling unprofitable. With the advent of kerosene, oil turned from a building material and an ancient weapon into the most efficient source of lighting and energy. Soon, people invented 2 more ways to refine oil. This helped Carl Benz invent the first gasoline-powered car, and Rudolf Diesel created the engine named after him. But the real breakthrough came when American entrepreneur Henry Ford adapted the developments of German inventors and produced the first mass-produced car, selling millions of copies. From that moment on, it was clear that oil would take a central place in the world economy for many years to come. And so it did. By the outbreak of World War II, control of oil reserves had become one of the major goals of the leading powers. One of the reasons for the outbreak of war was Germany's desire to see Soviet oil fields on the Caspian Sea coast. When the Germans failed to reach these reserves, and Romania, the main supplier of oil to the Third Reich, switched to the side of the anti-Hitler coalition, the German army lost any chance of victory. At the end of World War II, a new round of industrial growth and demand for oil began. The world economy grew rapidly, and the United States, unaffected by the war, by the 1960s, was producing half of all cars in the world. However, the speed of oil production didn't keep pace with this growth. By then, regions with large oil reserves, such as the Persian Gulf and Africa, had become targets of international interest. Oil scarcity explains why these regions have experienced some of the bloodiest military conflicts of recent decades. Anyway, by the 1960s, oil had finally taken the role of the main energy resource on the planet. For the countries that possess oil, it has become both a blessing and a curse. Some, like the Soviet Union, began to collapse, becoming dependent on oil reserves, while others, like Qatar, transformed from a desert to the center of luxurious world events. But what explains this difference? It's all about the same problem that unites all oil-producing countries. When your country suddenly finds oil, you become the lucky person who won the lottery. Of course, you will start selling that oil because the economy will not be able to absorb such a volume. Exporting the black gold will bring you a flow of foreign currency, and the money will start coming straight into your budget. However, in order to use that money inside your economy, you will have to exchange the foreign currency for your country's money. And this is where your currency will start to strengthen. At this point, it becomes convenient to import goods. They become much cheaper. You don't have to produce something yourself. You just buy high-quality goods at low prices. This seems great. Consumption levels are rising. People are buying new smartphones, appliances, and cars that were previously unaffordable. But at the same time, domestic businesses not related to oil production face competition from abroad and often lose out. The goods of local producers are now becoming more expensive, both in domestic and international markets, simply because of the strengthening of the national currency. As a result, local businesses cannot withstand competition and often end up being purchased by foreign companies. This is what happened in a number of countries where oil resources have become the dominant source of income. And if the government doesn't intervene, the market may end up under the control of foreign companies, which become major players and dictate their own rules. The government should prevent this by all means, as economic sovereignty is at stake. But why solve these complicated problems when there are billions of oil dollars under your feet? So, when resource money is flowing into the country, the authorities have no incentive to carry out serious reforms. But it's not that simple. For example, in Venezuela in the middle of the 20th century, there were no serious discussions about the budget because money was flowing in huge amounts, and the government simply used income from oil to cover all their needs. If they had focused on developing other sectors of the economy and started working on import substitution, perhaps the situation would have been different. Soon, they started thinking about it. In the 1960s, the Venezuelan government tried to do something to get out of the oil trap. For this purpose, the government allocated millions of bolivars to support industry. However, this didn't give the desired results because businessmen fought not for the improvement of product quality and production growth, but for access to the budget money. Therefore, the money was often spent on inefficient projects. Venezuela's finance minister later said, "The most important weapon of a finance minister who faces numerous budget requests is his ability to say that there is no money. But how could I do that when there was so much money?" When the price of oil dropped in the 1980s, the Venezuelan government canceled many social programs, leading to the massive riots known as Caracazo. This is not surprising because when a country depends on a single resource, its entire economy, social stability, and sovereignty are jeopardized and dependent on unpredictable fluctuations in the price of that resource. But wait, there are also rich oil-producing countries that are successfully utilizing the resources. What is their secret? Why are they not like Venezuela, Mexico, or Nigeria? The answer is simple. These countries do not spend all their oil revenues, but put them into a so-called stabilization fund. In the event of a budget deficit or a shortage of funds for essential payments, such as pensions, the oil money from this fund could be used. To replenish the stabilization funds, these countries have special budgetary rules. For example, if the oil price exceeds $50 a barrel, or if oil revenues this year exceed $1 billion, the surplus goes into the stabilization fund. The governments of these countries decide which limits will be set. Thanks to the stabilization fund, the extra oil money is not channeled directly into the economy, and as a result, the problems associated with the so-called resource curse, which we discussed earlier, do not arise. However, populists who seek to spend money from the fund on various projects, such as construction or education, do not always understand it or ignore it. Such populist ideas quickly resonate with the people, which sometimes puts the country in a choice between short-term gains or long-term stability. This is what happens year after year in Norway. But when the next opposition party comes to power, it is often in no hurry to implement these ideas. And this is not accidental because it has long been known what the policy of waste leads to. So the new government explains to the people that they overestimated the possibilities of the stabilization fund, and everything starts all over again. By the way, the government pension fund of Norway is the largest stabilization fund in the world. Today, it owns 1.5% of all shares on the planet. The Norwegian fund owns shares of such giants as Apple, Nestle, Microsoft, Samsung, and about 9,000 other companies. It's not comparable to BlackRock's private fund, which owns 5% of all the world's companies, but for a pension fund, the result is staggering. What is surprising is that this northern country, which is literally standing on rocks and has less than 3% of its territory suitable for farming, is making such massive investments. But thanks to a smart budgetary and tax policy, Norway consistently holds leading positions in the ratings of happiness and well-being of the population. However, dozens of other countries besides Norway have their own stabilization funds. And while the largest funds are owned by oil exporters, not all of these countries are as successful as Norway. Imagine that we represent countries as circles, where the size of each circle is the amount of oil reserves in that country. So, among the oil giants with the highest incomes and low unemployment rates are Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Canada, the United States, and Saudi Arabia. Norway is also somewhere among them. The second group includes countries with moderate unemployment and average incomes, including Russia and Kazakhstan. And the third group includes Venezuela, Iraq, and Iran, which, despite their abundant oil reserves, cannot boast of stable and prosperous economies. These countries are the most affected by the resource curse. They have failed to diversify their economies. For various reasons, mainly political ones, these countries do not attract foreign investors. After all, no one wants to invest in an economy where your assets can be nationalized at any time, and it is almost impossible to protect your rights. This is why Qatar is organizing the most expensive World Cup in history, and Saudi clubs are acquiring the most famous footballers for exorbitant sums of money. All of this is part of a major PR campaign aimed at improving the country's investment image and demonstrating that it offers not only oil resources, but also attractive opportunities for investors. Though the resource curse is not just about oil. The once mighty Spanish Empire was destroyed by the inflow of gold from conquered Latin America. A little later, Argentina focused on agriculture and also lost the world competition. Many economies collapsed because of dependence on a single resource. And it's clear that oil, which is the backbone of many economies today, will not last forever. According to various estimates, its reserves will only last for the next 50 years. And let this period last longer. But sooner or later, the super-rich Qatar may turn back into a desert, and Norway into just an unremarkable northern country. That's exactly what will happen if resource-dependent countries don't take advantage of their abundance. History shows that resources are the main source of geopolitical power. Today, it's oil. Tomorrow, it's something else. But the important thing is that while you are enjoying the benefits of the resource curse, it is slowly destroying your economy. That's why the countries that have abundant natural resources need to act now. Sooner or later, all resources will run out, and the situation will depend on how well you have prepared your economy for life without oil. Experience shows that only diversification and steady economic strategies can secure the future. And if you fail to do so, the country may face inevitable economic hardship. Please share your opinion in the comments. Let's discuss which countries managed to avoid the resource curse and which ones didn't. Thanks for your attention. Stay tuned and don't miss the next interesting episodes.